Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight in to what is, without a doubt, the defining tech story of 2026, the rise of Agentic AI. We're way past the initial honeymoon phase of those basic back-and-forth chatbots from a few years ago. We have officially entered the era of autonomous software agents. We're talking about systems that take on massive, multi-step projects, set their own sub-goals, and navigate complex databases with basically zero human hand-holding. But, naturally, this brings up a massive question. As we hand over the keys for execution and planning to these agents, are we actually supercharging our productivity, or are we just quietly handing over our professional autonomy? Let's get into it. To unpack all of this, we're going to hit four main areas today. First, the Agentic AI shift. Second, the enterprise boom and bottlenecks. Third, the human psychological cost. And finally, a security and governance playbook.
All right, part one, the Agentic AI shift from prompting to autonomous coworkers. Let's look at the fundamental architectural change in how we're actually interacting with AI today, leaving those 2023-era chat interfaces in the dust.
You can really see the structural shift here. Think about early generative AI. You were the brain of the operation, right? You gave it a passive prompt, and if the output was buggy or didn't make sense, well, you had to jump back in and tweak the prompt. You were the controller. But Agentic AI flips the script with goal-driven orchestration. Instead of a rigid prompt, you handed a broad objective. Something like, hey, analyze our customer churn, pull the database logs, and draft a software patch. The AI isn't just a tool anymore. It's an autonomous actor.
And this actor operates in a constant, dynamic feedback loop. It perceives the overarching goal, plans out the necessary subtasks, grabs the right tools, and gets to work executing. But step 5? Step 5 is where the real magic happens, self-correction. If the agent hits a brick wall like a 404 error on an API endpoint, it doesn't just freeze up and ping you for help. It analyzes what went wrong, literally reformulates its own plan, and finds an alternate route completely on its own. That ability to self-correct is the true technological milestone of this era.
Moving on to part two, enterprise, boom, and bottlenecks, the reality of ROI. Because the tech is incredible on paper, but what actually happens when you unleash this level of autonomy onto the corporate world? Let's separate the massive market hype from the hard reality of corporate balance sheets. On a macro level, the value proposition is practically irresistible right now. The global agentic AI market has blown past $9.1 billion this year alone. It's a massive boom, heavily driven by early adopters who are eager for an edge, especially in data-heavy sectors like finance, software engineering, and supply chain logistics. And they're writing those massive checks because of numbers like this. 6.4 hours. That is the estimated amount of time saved every single week for your average knowledge worker on these focused enterprise teams. By letting agents handle routine, multi-step execution, like IT incident triage, which used to eat up 45 minutes of a human team's time, agents are now diagnosing and pre-patching those same issues in under 90 seconds. So the efficiency spike? It is absolutely real.
But let's look at how this is actually playing out across the landscape, because there's a huge catch. Right now, nearly 80% of companies are actively testing or experimenting with agentic workflows in some capacity. Yet fewer than 20% have actually managed to deploy them at full, enterprise-wide scale. That is a staggering gap between running a cool pilot program and achieving actual scaled success.
Industry analysts have coined a term for this, the pilot-to-production bottleneck. Companies launch these pilots thinking, great, agents are going to instantly slash our payroll. But instead, they hit a massive operational wall. They quickly find out that their enterprise data is a chaotic mess, and their legacy IT infrastructure just wasn't built to handle non-deterministic software agents. It's kind of like trying to drop a jet engine into a 1990s sedan. On top of that, taking this to production requires heavy-duty security, continuous monitoring, and the token consumption costs are astronomical. The ROI exists, sure, but the total cost of ownership spikes way beyond what most leaders budgeted for. Which brings us to part 3, the human psychological cost, agency and vulnerability. While executives are stressing over token costs and server loads, the actual workforce is caught right in the middle of this massive shift. Let's look at the behavioral science side of things. What happens to us when we stop doing the work and just start managing the algorithm?
When you transition from being a creator to a supervisor, you run headfirst into something called cognitive offloading. If an agent is instantly cleaning up messy data or writing complex blocks of code for you, you're no longer wrestling with the friction of problem solving. And that friction is actually important. The enormous risk here is decision deprivation. Thinking is a muscle. If junior analysts are never forced to break down a complex problem from scratch, they're going to suffer cognitive atrophy. They might literally never build the deep foundational intuition they need to master their field.
And honestly, it's not just about our skills eroding. It's about our liability. This brings up one of the most fascinating and frankly kind of terrifying concepts in tech ethics, called the moral crumple zone. This was coined by researcher Madeleine Claire Leach. Think about how a car's crumple zone is designed to absorb the fatal force of an impact. Well, in highly automated systems, humans often become the ones absorbing the blame. When a high-speed agent inevitably makes a catastrophic error, say misrouting highly sensitive financial data, the enterprise is going to point the finger at the human supervisor who clicked approve, even if it was physically impossible for that human to review thousands of lines of agent-generated telemetry in real time. This creates a serious tug-of-war in corporate governance. On the left, you have human in the loop. This demands manual human approval before any sensitive action is taken. It's safe, absolutely, but it acts like a massive speed bump for companies that just want maximum velocity. On the right, you have human on the loop. This allows for fully autonomous execution, where the human only monitors things after the fact. The danger there is obvious. You're prioritizing breakneck speed, but you're still holding employees accountable for autonomous actions they couldn't possibly have intercepted.
And let's be clear, those autonomous actions have very real technical vulnerabilities. Because these agents can independently call up tools and execute code, engineering teams are battling some serious failure modes. First is indirect prompt injection. This is where malicious instructions are secretly hidden in unstructured data, essentially hijacking the agent's goal without anyone noticing. Second is rogue goal drift. This happens when self-correcting agents get tangled in recursive loops, just burning through expensive tokens or even overwriting good code trying to fix a minor glitch. And finally, the governance deficit we just talked about, deploying these powerful agents without the right guardrails in place.
So, Part 4, the Security and Governance Playbook, Actionable Strategies. We've covered the tech shifts, the harsh economic realities, and the very real human vulnerabilities. So how do we actually harness this productivity boom safely? Let's break down the playbook.
If you're on a tech team, these 3 guardrails are simply non-negotiable. First, you have to implement granular permissioning based strictly on the principle of least privilege. Never, ever give an agent unrestricted access. Keep them in sandboxed environments. Second, design highly intentional human-in-the-loop triggers. You need to define a strict blast radius. If an agent wants to touch production code or spend over a certain dollar amount, it absolutely must pause for human sign-off. Third, prioritize auditability over speed. If you don't have pristine trace logs showing exactly why an agent made a specific decision, that agent has no business being in production.
Now, for business leaders trying to bridge that pilot to production gap, here is your economic strategy. First, focus on specific operational friction points. Don't just deploy agents for the novelty of having AI. Second, you must account for the total cost of governance right from the start. Remember, this is a heavy infrastructure investment, not a cheap monthly software subscription. And finally, the companies seeing the highest ROI are the ones reinvesting all those saved hours into upskilling their teams and driving higher-order innovation. They aren't just using agents as a blunt instrument to cut headcount. And finally, for all of us as individuals who are now working alongside these autonomous coworkers, we need psychological practices to protect our own agency. Number 1, maintain practice friction. Intentionally do things the hard way sometimes. Write that code manually, or do the raw data analysis without the AI just to keep your foundational cognitive muscles sharp. Number 2, reclaim your executive ownership. You are the director here. Treat the agent's output as a rough draft that needs to be challenged, not as some unquestionable oracle. And number 3, demand organizational transparency. You need totally clear accountability boundaries from leadership to reduce workplace anxiety and keep your sense of control intact. Because ultimately, the goal for this year and for the future of work isn't to fight automation. The goal is to master it. We need to actively build systems where autonomous agents amplify our human potential, rather than replacing human wisdom. So I want to leave you with a provocative question to chew on today. Are autonomous AI agents truly making you more productive, or are you starting to feel a loss of control over your daily work? Thank you so much for joining me for today's Explainer. Stay curious, keep questioning things, and keep learning. Catch you next time.